hi, my question is, what changes, if any, to teaching reading and phonics would you institute when teaching a student with dyslexia and ADHD?
So first of all, I just want to tell you that when we talk about how we work with students who are struggling readers and writers, we engage practices that cast a wide net for all learners. So as we talk about this, if you're sitting here thinking, yeah, but I'm not really sure that's what my child is struggling with, I just want you to know that we are all about deep learning, good teaching practices, hands-on approaches. I try to really follow the research and know what's out there, not just in the field of speech and language pathology, which is my field, but in the field of reading, in the field of writing, in the field of education, and some of this neuroscience that's being done in this area. So I try to keep my eyes and ears open. And then on top of it all, what we share with you is not only what is documented to help kids, but also what we personally see working with our students all the time. So as I answer this question, I'd like everyone to have their ears open, whether you think your child has dyslexia, dysgraphia, ADHD, etc. This is good teaching, okay? So there are some basic principles that we definitely want to follow. So one thing you really need to know is that in order to be a good reader, we have to have a robust sound processing system. That is the connection between our oral language system and this system of reading and writing. There is a robust sound connection. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, you got to be kidding, even in English, like spelling is so crazy in English. How could it possibly be true? But actually, neuroscientists have looked at this. They know what areas of the brain are activated when we are reading and writing, and the sound processing area is key. And as kids are learning, it is the first activation. That's important to know, because you might say to yourself, well, how about if I have this program where we memorize what words look like? Well, does that activate sound? It doesn't. It activates some word knowledge, but that's not the primary activation area. So I just really want you to grasp this idea that sound processing is key for a new or struggling learner. So we need teaching to focus on sound. So first of all, I have to process those sounds and be able to separate them all out. And then I have to be able to attach letters to those sounds. And that process, it really has to be emphasized. So you're probably already thinking to yourself, this sounds like phonics. And it is, and it's more. That's one thing I want you to know. So we have to be able to process sounds. We have to be able to track sounds. We have to be able to make this fast connection. And then on top of all that, we have to activate our language system that tells us some information about what this word means and what grammatical structure is it fitting in and all of that. All this happens in just record time, right? And then we have to also develop this good word form memory. Word form memory, which tells us when I go to write this word and say I want to write the word here, I have to be able to know what my spelling options are, what is the context I'm using it in, not only what does the word mean, but what's the grammar that gives me more information about that context. And then I have to remember what it looks like if it's the listening here versus the place here, okay? And all of that, all of those skills have to be used, okay? If I use a word like herein, I picked a word that was hard to make any kind of more complex structure out of. So I'm making a compound word, you know, herein the audience, blah, 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 blah. Okay, whatever. Now I need to know that I've taken these two words and I've created a compound word, for example. Okay. And so I'm activating all this information that has to be tied to this. And our reading and teaching has to take every single one of those pieces. If you have a struggling learner, every single one of those pieces needs to be worked on as we go. So it's not just, hey, what sounds do I hear? Now, how do I create word form memory? How do I attach it to meaning? How do I attach it to grammar? That's why we actually talk about grammar. How do I attach it to this same word if it's in different structures? If I'm thinking of the word act versus action, what have I added on the end of that word that creates that structure? And we have to be able to weave all those pieces in, okay?
Yes.
And yes, it is complex, and yes, it needs to be very explicit. Yes.
I was about to say, I was going to use, we frequently talk about our teaching as being explicit.
Yes.
And that whole kind of concept that Rita just gave this of all these pieces that get woven together is what we mean from a more broad sense of what we mean by being explicit. And oftentimes you might say like, oh, we'll teach it explicitly. And it's like, great, but what does that actually mean? And so it is this really careful, very direct instruction in these individual threads within language arts, and then how to actually start like braiding those threads together so that you end up with this really nice, strong cord of language arts.
Right. So we have to understand that it's a complex system. We have to understand sound is our entry point, and we'll always be monitoring what we're learning. We have to understand that it's not, phonics isn't enough, but it is an important starting point. And we have to understand that we have to teach explicitly. And one of the ways we do that is what we call, we practice off the page and back on the page. Okay, so we might use manipulatives where we have letter tiles, and you may have some programs out there that have letter tiles. We have our sound bugs that we've created to be these kinds of tiles. But then we have to get it back into writing, and we always have to be practicing it in reading. So that's our next thing, is that everything we learn in a day gets practiced in reading and writing. And that really matters. And so we try not to, you as an educator have to know all these pieces, but we try to put all those pieces together for our students. And it is complex. I recognize it is complex. But when we do this, our kids progress. And that's what really matters.